Hello, and welcome to the Conspiracy of Goodness podcast, where you'll find one aha moment after another with some amazing people around the world that I'm talking to about a brighter future, about how they see opportunity and setback. There is an enormous wave of goodness and progress happening in the world all around us that no one knows nearly enough about. There are innovators who are solving some of the world's biggest problems. There are thought leaders who have had lives of complication and have insights that we can all use every day, and they're just not rising to the top of our online lives. I'm Dr. Linda Ulrich, founder of the Goodness Exchange, and that's what we shine a light on there. Innovation, ideas, amazing signs of progress that need to rise to the top of our awareness, because that's the future. That era is opening now. I'm certain of it. And today we're going to talk to someone who's doing so much in the way of helping all of us open new doors and windows and see things more clearly, especially after tragedy. Today, I'm going to introduce you to an amazing man that I discovered as a public speaker, but there is so much more to his work. Welcome, Jacob Green.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you so much for having me. This is really exciting. Thank you.
Well, I'm just going to tell you a little snippet about Jacob, and then I'm letting him tell his story because it's a remarkable place to come from and to be at now, in that his message and the insights that he has and he's sharing with the world are so timely for all of us. So Jacob's a wonderful man who's navigated a devastating setback in college to become one of the hottest and most upcoming global speakers right now on this topic of leveraging adversity and being able to see things more clearly, the forest through the trees concept, instead of seeing only the rocky path below our feet through the hard times, which he will help us understand are part of all our lives. And, he's written an amazing book called See Change Clearly, a topic that we can all relate to, of course, after the 2 years we've had with the pandemic. But this book has some magic in it. It may seem like it's leaning towards business, and it was an Amazon bestseller in 5 categories. It's like a day one new release bestseller in 5 categories. So obviously there's a lot there. But what I love is that that Jacob seems to cast a really shining, practical, useful for our lives now light on this Viktor Frankl quote that I've seen him use. He uses a Viktor Frankl quote, refers to it, that says, "Forces beyond our control will take away everything you possess, except for one thing: your freedom to choose how you will respond to a situation." This is the sweet spot in our lives right now. We need to have an expanded version of how we respond to adversity. And I'll just tell you just a few little things about why Jacob's been recognized around the world so much. He's a consultant, he's an entrepreneur, he rose through the business ranks to manage thousands of people quite quickly in life. And he's a nationally recognized expert in city and corporate leadership development. This is where it's at in this new era of our taking a second look at business and how we create corporate cultures where everyone's a leader. So I know we're going to get a lot of wonderful insights in that direction. But here's the really fabulous thing about Jacob. Jacob, through that all that success, he is a true humanitarian. I just had a brief conversation to begin with before we hit record, and this is the future of leadership. It's folks like Jacob who share their experiences, not all good, ups and downs, and turn them into ways that we can all live better lives and make the world a better place. Jacob's received numerous awards for his humanitarian work, including being the recipient of the National Caring Award in Washington, D.C., alongside Jane Goodall, one of my personal heroes. So, Jacob, I could go on and on. I'm going to stop right there and welcome you. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Linda. This is this is really exciting for me. This is, first of all, thanks for reaching out. Thank you for the invitation. I can't tell you how much I think what you're doing is exactly what we need right now. I mean, all of us, need the goodness exchange. We need a place where we can go to get our tanks filled up,
Yes.
to think differently about the world, because we're just inundated, as you and I have discussed, by all these messages and all of these challenges and issues. And what a wonderful community that you've created for us to be able to, get our tanks filled back up and get some new skills and new insights and new ways of looking at this journey that we're all on together. So I so appreciate the work that you're doing, and it's an honor for me to be having a little discussion with you today.
Well, this is the thing, the word there is together. I mean, boy, one thing we learned through the pandemic is no man's an island.
Yes.
We are doing this together. I've got a great few questions planned in that light in a minute, but yeah, you've referenced the goodness exchange. I didn't even mention that in my introduction, but I'm the founder of a website called the Goodness Exchange, where people can find thousands of articles that prove it is still an amazing world. And it's the place where in 2 seconds, you can get your faith in the world restored. There are amazing people doing really important things that we should all know about. It's just not rising to the top of our online lives, but it's going to if I have anything to do with it.
Absolutely. That'll be our mission right now.
That is our mission together. Okay, so Jacob, first, share a little of your story with us so people can appreciate this fact that all of us have challenges. Some of us have had some really incredible setbacks, and yet we can find the leverage the power in adversity. Talk to us about that.
Sure. So Linda, I'll take you back a little bit to sort of understand the paradigm that I'm coming at this challenge and change from. Goes back to my freshman year in college. I went off to school. I knew exactly what I wanted to study. I knew what I wanted to do. I was going to be an international diplomat. I was going to bring the world's people together. I was going to bring all nationalities, countries, languages. I was very optimistic heading off to college. And so I got into the international relations program at Cal Berkeley, Berkeley, and Berkeley, California. Don't worry, I love Berkeley. It's great. But they have one of the best programs in the world for studying diplomacy and international relations. And I was going to go work for the State Department. And so I headed off to Berkeley, and everything is like laid out for you, right? You know exactly what courses you're going to study, how many years it's going to take, what you're going to do. You don't have to make too many decisions. Life is very nicely laid out on this menu when you arrive as a freshman, especially if you're sort of know what you want to do and where you want to go. And it was the second semester of my freshman year, and I found myself in downtown Berkeley at the downtown Shattuck subway station. So for those of your listeners that are from Northern California, very popular downtown subway station. And I was heading into the subway, and I interrupted a robbery taking place at one of the ticket booths. And a man had broken into the ticket booth, and he was attacking the 2 subway workers that were inside of the booth. And the only thing that I could see at the time, hundreds of people were yelling and screaming and running all over the place, but I could see that inside the ticket booth, one of the subway agents was on a red phone. And so I thought, if I distracted a little bit of attention away from the subway workers, the assailant would maybe get out of the booth. The subway workers could finish their emergency phone call. Police could come, take care of business, and I could go along my way being a college freshman. And so I yelled at the guy to get out of the booth, and he listened, much to my surprise. He got out of the booth, and he charged right at me, and he pulled something out from behind his back and began striking me in the side of the head. And I only remember about 4 or 5 blows, and then everything from that moment went dark. And that was the moment where this beautiful, nicely laid out path suddenly had taken a significant detour. I had to drop out of college. I had to enter the world of full-time rehabilitation, going through speech therapy, physical therapy, occupational therapy, neurology, and neuropsychology 5 days a week. And at the end of that 6-month program up in Northern California, sort of learning how to do basic things all over again, I was told by the doctors that while I could do my daily tasks, I was not going to be able to return to an academic environment, that I needed to go to a rehabilitation facility to learn how to learn again. So I relocated to Southern California, which has one of the best brain injury programs in the world. It's called the Coastline Acquired Brain Injury Program. It's in Newport Beach in Orange County, California. I relocated down to Orange County and spent the next 2 years in a rehabilitation program learning how to relearn again, with a room full of folks that had been through different types of traumatic brain injuries, and learning how to get our brains in a position where we could acquire new skills and learn and grow. And so that's really that process, that 2.5 years, almost 3 years of full-time rehabilitation. That's really the basis for so many lessons. I mean, so many failures that I had, so many mistakes that I made, but so many different ways of looking at the process of dealing with challenge and difficulty, that I said to myself, I was in my little 800 square foot studio apartment with this little Murphy bed next to the rehabilitation facility. And I said, please let me someday be able to use this experience and apply this to something. Don't let me go through this 2.5, 3 years just because I have to do it and move on. Let me figure out some way to leverage what I've learned. And so those lessons became the book, and became now what I do with cities and counties and states and the federal government and corporations all throughout the country, is helping others, individuals and teams and organizations, navigate those challenges and crises that we all find ourselves going through.
So that is an extraordinary story. And that you were able to connect the adversity to possibility. This is this that you were just super fortunate? You were raised by people who taught you to do that? You had previous experiences that little one lesson somehow got into your young brain? Did you have mentors? Were they teaching you this at the brain injury center? Like, how do you get to be the person who responds like that? Something absolutely dreadful. And yep, a world full of possibility now exists. Where'd you get that leap?
Well, that's a good question. So a few things come to mind with that. Number one, I think all of us have a lot of messages, and maybe we can talk a little bit later on about the pros and cons of these messages. But certainly one of the messages that we all hear is, don't waste your time, right? And make the most out of everything that we go through. So I think that was definitely a part of my messaging when I was 18, 19. And there was a sense that I found myself in that 2-year rehabilitation program. The second program I was in, it was on an elementary school campus. And I was literally sitting in those little chairs, looking out the windows, watching the 3rd graders and the 4th graders and the 5th graders at recess, while I'm sitting in these classrooms learning how to learn again. And I just had this overwhelming feeling that, I did not want this to be wasted. I did not want this to be just something that I skipped through and was never able to use. As miserable and as depressed and as lonely as I was, I still had this sense that I wanted to do something with it. And I think it really does go back to the Viktor Frankl book. My mentor, one of my mentors is Bill Holloman-Darris, and he's written 5 or 6 books. And his mentor that he knew well was Dr. Viktor Frankl. And so before my brain injury in high school, when I had been connected with Bill got me that book, which I still have that copy of Man's Search for Meaning. And Bill, in my lowest of times in the brain injury experience, Bill reminded me of that book. And you've quoted and mentioned Dr. Viktor Frankl's quote about forces beyond your control can take away everything you possess, except for one thing, the freedom to choose how you respond to the situation. It's one thing I definitely remember. But he also said in that book, he said, life is never made unbearable by circumstances, but only by lack of meaning and purpose. And so my mentor, Bill, he really encouraged me in the most difficult of times, in the loneliest of times, when I felt like the world was closing in and I didn't know if the next day was worthwhile. He reminded me of that quote and really encouraged me to try to reconnect and seek out purpose. And if you don't mind, I'll share with you a little bit of the story as to how he did that, and the story that has stuck with me and maybe illustrates how I got through and navigated that period. It was the middle of the night. It was like 11 o'clock at night. I was in rehabilitation, and Bill had called. I don't know. He just checked on me every once in a while and made sure that I was doing okay. And it was one of those nights. And he said, you know what you need to do tomorrow? You need to get out of bed, call the local county food bank, and tell them that you're available to volunteer. I was like, what? I'm a full-time patient. I'm totally damaged goods. What are you talking about? And he's like, no, I want you to call the county food bank and tell me that you're available to volunteer. I'm like, okay, Bill, I don't know what you're smoking, but I love you and I trust you. And okay, I'll call the local county food bank tomorrow. So the next day, I called the local county food bank and I said, hey, my name is Jacob. I'm a full-time brain injury patient in rehabilitation, and I'm ready to volunteer. And thank goodness they did not hang up the phone on me. That was victory number one. And they said, come on in, and we got something for you. So, great. So it was about 3 weeks before Thanksgiving, and they sat me down at this desk, this workstation. I had a computer, I had this binder, I had a phone, and they said, you're going to work the Turkey Hotline. I was like, oh, Turkey Hotline. Okay, that sounds kind of cool. What is the Turkey Hotline? Well, people are going to call the Turkey Hotline that need a turkey for Thanksgiving, and you're going to connect them with people who have already indicated to us that they're willing to donate turkeys to people who can't afford turkeys. I'm like, great, sounds good, sounds super easy, that's fantastic. So Linda, the issue was that, I had a brain injury, right? So I think I sent turkeys to vegetarians all throughout California. I was really, really bad at my Turkey Hotline job. I couldn't figure it out, but I ended up grabbing my speech therapist and my occupational therapist, and we figured out some systems, and I figured out what I was doing. And here's what happened. A couple days before Thanksgiving, the Turkey Hotline rang, and it was a voice that I recognized. It was a caller that I had talked to before, but this time they weren't asking me for another turkey. This time they said, thank you. They said, Jacob, you won't believe this. My husband got laid off. I have 3 kids to feed. I didn't know how we were going to have a Thanksgiving dinner, but this huge freaking turkey arrived on our porch. We're going to have food for days. Thank you so much for what you did. I so appreciate this turkey. Thank you so much. I mean, I was fired up. I showed up 3 hours early to my Turkey Hotline the next day. I couldn't wait to get there, right? It totally gave me this sense. And what I learned immediately on that day was that no matter what your situation is, Dr. Viktor Frankl was right. It's really this lack of meaning and purpose that is really the threat to our ability to move forward. And the great news is, no matter what is stacked against us, no matter what the limitations are, no matter what the challenges are, there are always others that are in need of our support. And it turns out the best medicine, better than any procedure that I went through or any narcotic that I was given or any medication I was on, the best medicine was actually figuring out how I could do something in service to others. That was a selfish act. That Turkey Hotline ended up being what gave me an incredible new sense of hope and purpose and life. That Turkey Hotline is what allowed me to cash in the best gift that I've ever been given. It turns out when I dropped out of UC Berkeley, when I dropped out of college, the UC system gave me the best gift I have ever been given. It was a golden ticket. They said if rehab takes a year or 2 years or 5 years or 10 years, you can cash this in at any UC school you want, any school. And so that Turkey Hotline gave me the hope, gave me the energy to cash in that golden ticket. And so I did. I cashed that in at the University of California, Irvine. I'm proud to say that I have the record for the most number of years it's taken anybody on earth to get their bachelor's degree. But after 8.5 years, I got that bachelor's degree, and then I went on and I got my master's degree after that. But it was because, Linda, it was because of the connection and the understanding and the experience that I had learning that we all have something to give back. And truly, it's not just about helping others, but it can restore meaning and purpose and keep us going through this really challenging journey of life.
That story is never going to leave my brain.
The Turkey Hotline. I
The
love
Turkey
Thanksgiving
Hotline.
now, right? I was never a fan until the Turkey Hotline, and just giving me a whole new way to look at it. I thought I had nothing to offer. I really was questioning moving on. I mean, I was really questioning the next day. I mean, kid you not, I'm not trying to just say that. I mean, it was a daily thought about whether or not I could make it to the next morning of rehab. And everything changed, because of Bill and the connection with the book and those turkeys. It's a lesson that's carried through to today, when I'm in my most challenging times, which it's not like you go through something and then all of a sudden you're jumping around with unicorns and ponies and having a great time. You still go through challenge and bad days. I always try to go back to the Turkey Hotline and figure out, okay, I'm in that zone. What can I possibly do to restore some of that purpose and some of that hope?
That I love that story for so many reasons, but as you frame it up there just then, it reminds me, I'll say right off, my dad was a fabulous surgeon, the last of the Mohican doctors that you had his home phone number and he delivered your baby, took out your appendix, met you at the ER and stitched your kid up. And yet we have a family history of the blues. There's no doubt about it. Depression runs in my family. And you've reminded me with that story that I was able to, for 35 years, lay in bed every day and talk my way into caring, talk my way out of bed with that same level of depression that my dad probably suffered with. But boy, you didn't talk about it in those days. There was no way. Physicians talked about their own things, But so every day I've done that, and you've reminded me of why. I would lay there and talk to myself about all the people who are counting on me. 12 families. My husband and I are both dentists. We had 12 families that were relying on us to help them put bread on the table. People's jobs counted on my getting up in the morning and feeding their own kids, right? And it was all the people I knew I was going to see. I would always check my schedule the night before, so I knew these special people that were coming in that I had to serve. Yes. This service to others, yes, is at our foundational core. I believe it.
100%. Yes. Yeah, and I don't know. I'm not quite sharp enough to figure out why the reasons for that is, but I do know that you're 100% right. I do know that time after time, story after story of people who have really felt like hopeless and without purpose. Service to others is a very selfish act, and it's a permissible, encouraged, wonderful, selfish act. A lot of selfish acts get us in trouble or are not encouraged or are against the law or whatever, right? But this is one thing in service to others where you can really fill that tank and you can really give yourself some hope and some meaning. And I always challenge folks. I get incredible contacts from people literally all over the world going through whatever their challenge is or whatever their issues, and they've been given a copy of the book, right? And they're going through their issue. And I always challenge them, okay, tomorrow, just like Bill told me, call that local county food bank. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong, right? But have that experience of getting out of our own brains, which can just be so consuming, and just giving in whatever way that you can. And there's lots and lots of ways to do that. So yeah, you're right. We're wired for whatever reason to be in service of others. And that's when the best of humanity, I think, surfaces, when we can work with others in service of others.
Yeah. Absolutely. I just, I think that the people I've noticed in my practice, I get to be involved with lots of people's lives, and the people I've noticed who have done more than just survive the pandemic, they've seemed to thrive a little bit. It's the folks who found ways to help their neighbor that was elderly and couldn't get out to the store, or they had new relationships with their kids. They're like with me, my college kids all came home with a significant other, and our family went from 2 to 8, and we lived together for 18 months like that. I had to step it up. I had to choose my battles and not worry about the kitchen being terribly clean. And I mean, anybody who had to do something for others, even if it meant setting aside something that was important to themselves, seemed to thrive.
Yes, absolutely. You bring up so many interesting things. One of the things that you reminded me of is this this notion, like when you just reflected back on this last, 2 years period of time and helping others and working with others and stepping up, it's something that we're all going through right now. And I hear this from our clients a lot, that we just want to be done with COVID, right? We just want to go through, we want to be done. We want to leave that behind us. We want to close that chapter. And I'm always encouraging others and, the businesses and the cities and the teams I'm working with, wait a minute. Just like when I was sitting on that Murphy bed in the rehabilitation process, if I were to skip over all those things that I have learned, right? The Turkey Hotline lessons and all the lessons in rehabilitation, all the techniques and strategies and tools, if I just throw that away and close it and move forward, haven't I just missed out on an incredible opportunity to be a better person and take with me some tools and resources? And the things that you just mentioned, the lessons that you learn about family and connection and reliance and service and partnership and the dangers of solidarity. And by the way, the people that live in solidarity before and after COVID, solidarity for some of us was something that we just learned in COVID, but the reality is people all around the world feel lonely and hopeless and need that human connection. And so the gift that we have of COVID or any tragedy, I wrote my book before COVID, so any tragedy or any challenge is that we have a chance to reflect, grab the tools, and apply them moving forward. And, without those lessons that you just mentioned, Linda, about the insights and the victories and the wins in your family era in COVID, gosh, how much crappier life will be moving forward. We actually need to, instead of just skipping so quickly, we actually need to make sure we take a moment to process that which we've been through and that which we've learned and gained as a result of this tragic, traumatic, awful, terrible, horrible, loss-filled moment. But there is still something that we can gain and take away from it.
And I think you said take a moment to reflect. I think that's what we were not doing at all before the pandemic. Most of us, no generalizations there, but most of us, that was like a giant forced pause button.
Yes.
It was
Right.
We're all on a train speeding along and somebody pulled the emergency brake.
Yes.
And that reflection, I want to veer just slightly into the business world on this. I'm a professional that didn't have enough business training, but good dentist, but no preparation for being business owner. But the one thing I think I did well is just this last year in our annual planning day in January, we organized a lot of time to talk about what we've learned together in the last 2 years. In healthcare, I can see so much potential in healthcare leaders organizing small groups of people to feel refreshed. We're still hearing how this is dragging on and still weighing, and there's just chaos in the healthcare world. But if we hit the pause button and reflect and swap stories. What it was like on day 4 in my dental practice was insane. And yet the hygienists all pooled their resources. Most of them knew how to sew. They came in with these little surgical caps that one of them had sewn. I never told them to do that. They just figured it out themselves. There was thing after thing that they just figured out for themselves. And it's time to celebrate that. Decide, celebrate our ingenuity. And, oh yeah, remember you did this and then I did this. And
well, let me tell you, let me share with you what you're doing there. You're shifting to a growth mindset. Okay, so when you're in tragedy or trauma or loss or brain injury or COVID or whatever it is, you go away from that growth mindset. You go to fight or flight, right? Or freeze is the third one that we talk about, but fight or flight essentially. And you go into this period of chaos and challenge. The trick is where we can really get growth and success and development and purpose and hope is shifting into a growth mindset. Now, how do we do that tangibly? The beauty of it is it applies to exactly what you just said in your dental practice, in your work environment, but it can also apply to your home. So we have 4 kids, right? 14, 12, 9, and 7. And what we really had to think about doing is these kids were living with fear and terror every day. They really felt like, I can't see my friends. I can't see my teachers. Am I going to get sick? Is dad or mom going to die? Am I going to die? What, all these things. That's not a growth mindset. But what we as parents can do is help our kids switch into a growth mindset. Asking your kids questions like, what are you learning about our family? What are you learning about your friends? What are you learning about school? What do you appreciate about school that your teachers are providing for you? It's the same thing that the best teams right now are doing in the workplace. The best teams, Linda, are doing what you have done. Now, you are in the absolute minority, because I can tell you right now that most bosses, most leaders, most company, they're just trying to move through. They're just trying to get back to business. And that's okay and understandable, but they're missing on the opportunity of what you've done with your people, the growth, because the connections that you can create by just asking the question, gosh, guys, let's reflect for a minute. Where have we been? What was the worst moment of the last 2.5 years? What was the best moment for you? What have you not shared about the last 2.5 years that you think could apply to our dental practice? Just taking, instead of a staff meeting, talking about our numbers and our revenue and our patient schedule and just taking 30 minutes to have that conversation switches your practice into a growth mindset, switches your employees and your staff and your team into a growth mindset, so that whatever the challenge is moving forward, you're teaching and training your team that no matter what it is that comes ahead of us, we're not going to ignore it. We're not going to be Pollyanna. We're not going to say, it'll all be okay, don't worry about it. We're going to address it. We're going to define it. We're going to talk about it, and we're going to leverage it. And that's the power. The power is when we can start going through tragedy and trauma, owning it, being there with it, being present with it, and then ultimately leveraging it. What do we learn, and how can we apply it moving forward? And that's really been my challenge, to help try to keep me alive. And again, form the basis of the book. What can be learned? What can be leveraged? And how do we use this stuff to move forward and make impact?
We have got to incorporate this kind of mindset in what comes next. I really see us trembling on the edge of turning the page and opening a new era. And what we're talking about is so possible from like a macro level too. We can decide as human beings to live more like this, that we're, and as a society, it will be that way. The more of us that adopt a more reflective and possibility focused mindset to tragedy, because I don't know, I think we're going to have to live with this pandemic for a while. We certainly got all kinds of new challenges economically coming down from the Ukraine situation. We've got just no end to the climate change challenges ahead. Yeah. And that brings me to something I definitely want to talk about, is that relates to exactly what you just said and exactly this little encapsulation of doom and gloom that I just did. Sorry for that. From the global positive media mogul.
You're making it up with a goodness exchange. So you got tons of goodness that you're putting out there in the world. So you're entitled, because it all comes, it's all part of the same boat. It's all together. We gotta have all that together.
So if we turn the page on just recognizing that is, and I'm sure that's a part of your philosophy too, like there's some things that we just can't lament. We just have to recognize that this is.
Yes. I can share a little bit of a strategy that comes in with that. It's something that I learned in rehabilitation, and to your point, because it's really easy to hear a lot of this and think, gosh, I'm falling short. I'm not leveraging. I'm not making the most out of all this. I'm not learning. I don't have a growth mindset. And then, boy, that really starts to tumble. And there's something that I learned in rehabilitation that helps with that. We have all this pressure as human beings to seize the day, carpe diem, make the most, don't waste any minute. All these influencers that we're always hearing about, it, like, get out of bed, it's 4 a.m. I hope by 4:30 you've done 7,000 burpees and, you've already written 2 books by the weekend. And, all this incredible pressure to be like the best you could possibly be. And, it is really, really, really exhausting and intimidating. And what I learned in rehabilitation and in the brain injury program is a great strategy. And it's a strategy that seems to resonate with so many of my clients and colleagues. It's called do-over day. The beauty of this world is that the sun sets and the sun will rise. And we get another chance tomorrow. And so if today was crappy, if today you ate bonbons on the couch and watched Oprah, don't worry about it. Don't call your therapist necessarily right away. I mean, maybe call you, but don't feel the sense of total failure. Sometimes the best that we can do is just eat bonbons in that day. Sometimes that's what we needed to do to get through that day. And at the very end of the day, you say, you know what? This is a do-over day. Tomorrow I get another start. Tomorrow I get a fresh approach. Let's see how tomorrow goes. And my wife and I have this great strategy because we have some bad days here. I mean, some days we screw up as parents. Some days we just don't get it right. We're both trying to work full time. We're both trying to make it happen. We're running a business, and we have a lot of bad days. And at the end of the day, when we instead of saying, gosh, I'm a failure, I didn't carpe diem, we say, do-over day? Yeah, do-over day? Okay, do-over day, agreement. And it's like this release. It's like this permission to go ahead and make sure that, okay, we'll get to tomorrow. It'll be all right. And so always making sure that while we're leveraging adversity and see change clearly and seeing things differently and doing all these good things, we're also giving ourselves permission to be human and know that some of those pressure messages sometimes can be counterproductive, and we have to have a nice balance. And so I like that you bring that balance to the conversation, to the table. We're not just going to talk about all the positive things of COVID in the last 2.5 years. I'm going to ask my team also, what was tough? Where did you fall short? Where did you forget to reach out to others? Where did you contribute to some of the chaos? Where do you want to make sure that doesn't happen again? There's a balance, and we take that balance with us as we move forward.
This is a great practical tip, Jacob. Really a great practical tip. You saw me write it down.
Do-over day. Do-over day, right? Like, yeah, put it on the sticky pad, put it right next to the monitor. That's what I usually tell people is it just makes the day easier too. If at the end of the day, you can pull that card out. We don't want to pull it out 7 days a week.
Yes.
But occasionally we want to have that card to be able to play, and it's okay.
Yes. Oh, okay. Let's take a break. And I want to connect people to the Goodness Exchange and all the bits and pieces that are there for people to have these kind of moments in our lives. We've got to find a balance between the breaking news. I don't tell people to turn off the news. You might think that I do, but I do not. But boy, it's finding that balance in our lives between the social media and breaking news and being in real moments with real people. We've got to find that measure of balance. And I think the Goodness Exchange can help people. So we'll take a break and then we'll come back. Dr. Linda here. If you are hoping the world is a lot better than what we see on the news and social media, and if you've been overwhelmed by the misery and negativity coming from the screens in your life, I've got a wonderful connection for you. What I've learned after almost a decade of curating the internet for insight innovation is that there is an enormous wave of goodness and progress well underway in the world that almost no one knows about yet. And that's what led me to create this podcast. And then I co-founded the Goodness Exchange. The Goodness Exchange is an amazing place on the internet now where you can enjoy unlimited access to hundreds of articles that give you a more complete, positive perspective about the state of the world. You can listen to exclusive bonus content from this podcast with our guests who are knee-deep in solving some of the world's most vexing problems, and yet they still think the future is bright. We need to know what they know. And at the Goodness Exchange, you can explore a feed of exclusively good news and recommended other kinds of content created by the Goodness Exchange community. No one with good ideas and good intentions need feel alone again. You are right to hold out hope for humanity. Millions of people are out there creating a better world, and we have created a gathering place for all that wonder. Who knows what's possible now that there's a place on the internet created to bring out our best impulses and our collective genius. To explore the home for goodness on the internet, visit goodness-exchange.com/membership. Thanks. Okay, So we're back, and I am so excited to continue talking to Jacob Green. Jacob has a book called See Change Clearly. And in the first half of this interview, he's helped us see so much more clearly the things, the power, the opportunity in setbacks. So thank you so much. Let's continue with the journey, Jacob.
Sounds really good. I love it. Again, this is so wonderful for me to be able to learn from you and be able to share with your audience, hopefully practical things that they can take back to their families or to their teams, their organizations, their environments, whatever it is. That's the beauty of this. We find that like we're all on this journey together. Like every single person, no matter how perfect you think their lives have been, they've been through challenge, they've been through trauma, they've been through, and thankfully we have a lot more folks that are visible that are talking about those challenges and issues. And so the key is we can learn from each other, and you've provided us a beautiful platform to be able to do that. So I'm grateful for you, to you, for allowing us to have this kind of environment, to have these challenging conversations and take a little time out to provide these insights for all of us.
Well, that's why we called it the goodness exchange, because we want to create a landscape there where people can meet and collaborate and just be with others who have good intention and good ideas, and just find that, because I really truly believe there are far more people. You know, the advent of the internet did not change our basic human nature. Our basic human nature is to contribute and to be a part of things that are growing and changing. So we could go on and on. Okay, because let's get to the next subject we've danced around. But I want to share with you that just yesterday I interviewed a fabulous podcaster who runs the podcast for something that most people have heard of. It's called the Spartan races. Okay, I've had the Spartan races started in Vermont, where my husband and I have lived for 30 years, and I thought I knew just about everything there was to know about the Spartan races. I was so wrong. And one of the things that, and when I learned more about all the things they're doing that are pretty much in line with what you and I have been talking about, you know, facing a struggle with others. God, there's so much camaraderie in this whole Spartan race system. And you don't have to, you know, run 100 miles, and it doesn't have to be about obstacle courses. It can be about being in a challenge with others. She had so much to say about creating and looking out for the circumstances in our lives where we have the opportunity to be in a challenge with others. Yeah. I just think that that's what you're talking about. There's so many bits and points here in our family lives and in our working lives where we can share a struggle with others, and it can actually be a pleasure, I think, on balance.
Yes, yes. I mean, wow. Okay, so now you're entering a topic that I have so much to talk about, because a huge part of what my team and we do every single day is we work with teams to, really help them level up their game and create really strong partnerships and bonds to get through whatever challenge or issues going on in their companies and contribute and make impact. And so, so many stories come to mind, but I'll give you a little bit of maybe some research background that will help us understand how important those connections and those team members are. There's a group of researchers led by Reynolds and Lewis out of the UK, the Netherlands, and Purdue in the United States. And they got together 20 plus years ago, and they wanted to figure out what teams were the highest performing teams in the world. What was it that made certain teams so effective, so successful in their daily business life, right? And so they brought teams of 12 into various rooms. They gave them a set of conditions, a problem to solve, and they timed them and they scored them for accuracy. And in the middle of the project, they changed the conditions, and they still required these teams of 12 to solve the problems. And these were all kinds of different companies, all kinds of different teams from organizations, literally anywhere on the planet, okay? And they studied these organizations and teams, and they tried to figure out what is the one factor that differentiates a successful team from the mediocre teams. And it was one factor that they then published in the Harvard Business Review. in an article called Teams Solve Problems Faster When They're More Cognitively Diverse. It turns out the one factor that correlated directly to our teams, our ability for teams to be successful together, is cognitive diversity. Now, what is that? What is cognitive diversity? Cognitive diversity is a team that has people and individuals with different backgrounds, experiences, worldviews, and expertise. It turns out that when we have a team with low levels of cognitive diversity, when we're all kind of just the same, we're not effective in making impact and positive difference in our teams and organizations and our companies. It turns out the best and most effective teams are those where the individuals have vastly different experiences, vastly different backgrounds, vastly different expertise. You know, we thought, or there was a lot of thinking that it was going to be diversity that was going to be the factor: race, religion, sexual orientation, gender, these things. Now, those things turn out to be really, really important to boost the culture and feel a sense of belonging, but it wasn't correlated to impact. It wasn't correlated to success in the workplace. And so it turns out we need each other. It turns out we need the differences in each other. It turns out we need vastly different people. Can you imagine this? With different philosophies and different expertise and different experiences to come together around a common mission. And that's when you can really create impact. And unfortunately, right now in this country, we're so divided, right? Into so many different groups. Well, you know, if you go back to like our middle school days, we didn't want to be different, right? We didn't want to stand out. We didn't want to eat lunch alone. We wanted to conform. We wanted to be just like the bigger group. We wanted to separate by those who made us feel comfortable. And it turns out that per the research, that makes us really, really, really ineffective in the workplace. And what we have to do is bring people together and create teams of different thoughts and different perspectives and different knowledge and able to make successful impact and make a difference. So, you know, that's all to say. You touched on opening the door to the value of human connection. It's not just this fuzzy pie in the sky thing that we say, that you said. It's actually tied, what you said, directly to the research. It's actually related directly to our ability to make impact, is people coming together of different backgrounds in service to others.
Well, it to me, it's always made perfect common sense that your solutions are only going to be as good as the range of creativity, the range of imagination, the range of experiences that you start with. That's it, you know. So if you got everyone in the room who thinks exactly alike, you're going to all propose the similar solution.
Yes. In fact, it's interesting you say that, because when those same researchers would measure the cognitive diversity of teams, right? They created a tool called the AEM Cube assessment, which we now use with teams all throughout the world to measure the cognitive diversity of the teams. They would ask those teams, how many of you feel like your cognitive diversity of this team is really high? And every hand would go up. Everybody would say, oh yes, my team is very cognitively diverse. We are incredibly cognitively diverse as a team. And then they would measure the cognitive diversity of that team, and it was almost always really low. Why? Because we like to surround ourselves with people that think the same way. When we hire, you know, you and I, we've hired lots of people in our careers. We ask ourselves after the candidate leaves, would that person be a good F word? What's the F word? Would that person be a good fit?
Friend. Oh, I was thinking friend.
Yes. Friend or fit, right? Yes. And what we're actually doing is we're lowering the cognitive diversity of our team, because we don't want someone that will disrupt, bring different ideas, think differently. Well, in fact, that's counterproductive to our teams and to our relationships. And so we have to really fight that urge to only surround ourselves by Republicans or Democrats, to only surround ourselves by people in the workplace, or hire people for fit, because in so many ways that works against our ability to solve complicated problems together and really make impact together in service to others.
This reminds me of something that that I ran across years and years and years ago. So it's this concept of it's so pointed to exactly what we're just talking about here. Who would you want to be in a lifeboat with?
Mm,
Now that question
mm,
is super important for what you just said. I can think oh no, my friends are not going to like this, but we wouldn't necessarily want to be in a life and death situation with every one of our friends. We would, if we have a chance to think about it, want to be with people who have very different experiences, very different skills, very different ways of thinking about what's possible than us. And that's not exactly who we would choose as our friends, right?
yeah, yeah.
And so it's like, who would you want to be in the lifeboat with? Well, somebody who knew something completely different than me, because if I'm all the resources we have, we're going down.
Yes. Well, in your lifeboat or in your team, you
Yes.
want shared values, but complementary skills. And let me explain that. In your lifeboat, you don't want someone who's going to steal your food and steal your water while you're trying to get some rest. So you want that shared value of integrity and honesty, right? But it does us no good if neither one of us knows how to fish. You want someone with complementary skills, someone in that life raft that can figure out how to fish and grab food. So it's not about, when you're asking yourself that question about who we're surrounding ourselves with, it's not about, I want someone disruptive that's so different, they're going to, blah, blah, blah. It's, I'm looking for shared values, but complementary skills. And so many times we're actually looking for shared values, the same people, the same skills, the same mindset, the same. That doesn't really do us any good. So your lifeboat example is a great one, and really helps illustrate how important it is. It's life or death in a life raft, but for a company's future and a company's success, it's also critically important that they form teams with that same sort of approach and philosophy, shared values, complementary skills.
That's a great little phrase I'm going to remember on and on. Okay, so one of the things that this makes me think of is, as far as the diversity, the cognitive diversity. Yeah, that's kind of a big word for most people.
Yeah.
But what's a better way of easier way of saying that, or framing that up in a really simple way? It's just that people who think maybe fundamentally different, or think from a different angle. How would you describe cognitive diversity, so we have absolute clarity on what we're talking about here?
Well, yeah, you're right. It's people who have different expertise, different backgrounds, different experiences, different paradigms, different ways of approaching the world. And that's cognitive diversity. There's a diversity in the way in which we think and approach our daily life.
Okay.
And,
Go ahead.
Linda, I just want to, because I have a little bit of a memory challenge. This story came to mind, and I think it's really appropriate. I just want to share it with you really quickly, because it's about that exact. And this is a great challenge. 2 days ago, I won't use the name of the channel because this was just 2 days ago, and I don't want to get in trouble here. But I like watching poker on TV. Okay, Texas Hold'em. And I'm watching Texas Hold'em on TV, and my 14-year-old daughter is on the couch. She's in the room with me. And I'm watching Texas Hold'em. And the way in which this channel is produced, there are, in my opinion, some chauvinist and sexist comments that are occasionally made by the host of this poker channel. And it's really offensive. And in our house, I've mentioned that before while watching it, that my daughter, my 14-year-old daughter, knows how I feel about that. So 2 days ago, she says to me, "Why do you still watch this channel, even though it's sexist and chauvinist?" And I said, "Leah, the issue is that we have to figure out what we can learn, even when there are some elements that we strongly disagree with and we don't believe are part of our value system. We have to try to find what it is that we enjoy." And I said to Leah, "Leah, look, I actually learn a lot about the game and a lot about strategy from watching this channel, but I also recognize the limitations and those things that are not compatible with my own value system." And I said, "Leah, that's our challenge. You're going to come across a lot of people that you may not like their political views. You may not like their hobbies, You may not like their professions or the way they do something or whatever they're involved with. But if you could try to figure out what you can learn from them, challenge yourself to dive a little bit deeper beyond how they voted in the last election, just try. It's not easy, but just try. Boy, that's when we can really get some benefit and some potential for understanding and connection. Not saying you can do it every time, but Linda, you really, I apologize for interrupting you there, but I think for me that really illustrated this challenge that we have for each other to see what we can learn, even despite some of the things that may not be in alignment.
This is so huge. I think I recognize that our senses have been like over insulted so much, or we've allowed them to be. That's a whole nother rabbit hole. That the minute there's like triggering phrases or triggering words, the minute something gets said that's one of those triggering words, we close our ears. Yeah. We hear nothing past that. Yeah. And I've written a book too. It's called Happiness is an Option. And that's one of the things that I talk about in there that, it's like dating when you first meet someone or when you try and broach a subject with someone, or maybe people right around the staff room table. But you don't start at somewhere on a first date where you talk about that you hate your mother. Yeah. Yes. You're never going to get a second date.
Yes.
Ever.
Yes.
Right? Yes. What's that first date look like? It's a discovery process. You're sitting around the table, you're drinking a drink or whatever, and you like that movie too, or you traveled there, me too. How old were you when the whole thing? It's just like lightning round to find out what you have in common, what you can agree upon.
Yes.
And you don't even broach your wacky growing edges or the places where you're vulnerable, or you have the strongest feelings. And most of us know where those spots are.
Yes.
Where we're okay. So
well, Linda, let me just add to that.
Yeah, add.
So a huge part of what we do every single week is team building facilitation. We take teams offsite and we do team building facilitation. We don't start day one, module one, with let's talk about what the major issues are and the landmines in the office and all the controversial things. It may take 2 days of just getting to know each other about our hobbies, our interests, our families, before we're safe and comfortable to talk about those difficult discussions. But here's the problem. So many workplaces and so many offices and organizations, they don't take the time to do those steps that you just mentioned. They don't take the time to build up to those difficult things. And so they either do one of two things. They either ignore the big problems in the workplace and they just grow. And by the way, families do the same thing, right?
I was going to say the same thing.
Families do the same thing. They either grow or they don't have the skills and the trust and the foundations built up first. And so the moment that a word is mentioned, the moment that something is referenced, it explodes into World War XVII, right? And so we really help organizations and individuals start with the fundamentals. It's like, this happens all the time. The CEO will say, yeah, we want you to come in and do the facilitation, but we want to get right to strategic planning because we've had a major problem with bringing people back from COVID and who wants to work at home and all this kind of stuff. And I say, great, let's start with some team building activities. And we don't need team building. We work together every day. I go, do you talk about these hard things every day? They go, no. I go, so their toolboxes are empty. They don't have the tools to be able to have those hard conversations. You can talk about your engineering project, but you can't talk about the hybrid environment, the work from home, the mother or father that has the childcare issue. We got to give you those fundamental tools first, so that by the time that you get to those hard conversations, those crucial conversations, you're open to it. You can listen. You can have the safe environment. So it's exactly what you just said. We have to build up to that, and we have to invest in creating those environments. And that's what we do in those offsite retreats.
This is that level of urgency in business to solve the problem and move on is the great pressure cooker most businesses are in, right?
Yes.
This not being able to step back. I would argue that it's probably comes from the fact that where we started this conversation is that almost everyone is carrying a burden.
Yes.
Just that some people carry their burdens on their sleeve and we know that there's the struggle at home, and it could be the leader, it could be our team leader, it could be our middle manager, it could be, 3 or 4 employees, but everyone is carrying a burden. And I loved what you said. I'd like to wrap. Okay. I hope can we continue this discussion?
Absolutely. This is the best. I mean, I love this. So let's, you just tell me to hang up whenever we need to hang up. And
Okay, well, we didn't even get to have the questions I want to ask you. So let's wrap up for today.
Sure.
I try and keep these episodes about an hour because I noticed that an hour is how I love for people to listen to this podcast on walks. There's a few podcasts that I love on a walk that just send my mind soaring and expanding. So we'll finish up. I'm not going to have a sense of urgency, speaking of a sense of urgency and a pressure cooker about getting to these other topics. But one thing I'd like to wrap up today's conversation on, and then I promise folks that we will have a part 2 of this soon, because I think we've struck on some very sweet spots. Be able to give people more expansive. I always call it, like, I like to be out on my growing edges, not all the time, but I feel like our conversation, you've brought me out to my growing edges, right where that spot is that I can say, aha, instead of, oh no.
Well, that's awesome. Thank you.
I
really to hear that. That's the hope, right? Is that we push it a little bit here, and that's what the book intends to do. And push us to discover and uncover some of the things that may not be so easy to talk about, but that we need in our lives moving forward.
Well, I think also we've laughed a lot and smiled a lot, and that means that we can tackle some of these hard places in life with a sense of good humor and patience with ourselves and others.
Yes.
So let's wrap up on on this topic. If you've got a few stories, just because I want people to know, back to this, everybody's carrying a burden.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
If you're exasperated with your coworker or your brother-in-law or your middle manager or whoever, you said to me something that I'd love to just chat about for a minute before we close today. You said, hey, when you speak you do so much public speaking, almost every 3rd or 4th person will come up to you afterwards and say something like, hey, I've never told anybody this, but
yes.
And you sort of give people permission to talk about the struggles.
Yes.
I mean, talk to me about that a bit.
Yeah, it's one of the most incredibly rewarding and humbling outcomes of this journey is exactly what you just described. So, do these conventions and conferences or, corporate retreats or whatever. And that, afterwards there's, they're buying the book or whatever. Sounds a little bit odd to say, but, there's a line, right? And every 3rd or 4th person will start by saying, I've never told anybody this, but, and I mean, you can imagine after all these years hearing these just unbelievable stories. And it's because, so I go up on the platform and I talk about the brain injury, and I talk about one of my greatest insecurities, which is a visual impairment that I was left with as a result of the injury, which is a light sensitivity visual impairment. So I have to wear dark sunglasses indoors. And I share the story that even though these dark sunglasses that were custom made for me, that eliminated 99% of my visual impairment and my light sensitivity, even though I had the cure for all of my challenges with my eyes, I would leave those sunglasses in my bag on purpose, and I would not wear them in City Hall. I would rather vomit. I would rather go to the ER for injections and IVs of pain medication. I would rather go home and be a terrible husband and be locked in a dark room to get the migraine away. I would rather do all of that than just wear my sunglasses indoors and be different. I didn't want to be different. It was such a tremendous source of insecurity. And at a certain point, I had to learn that this source of insecurity, my sunglasses, I needed to figure out how to grab it and how to make it a source of empowerment and wear my sunglasses. And so what I did is, in this little group one day at work, I decided to sort of disclose and talk about for the first time the brain injury and why I was going to need to, from that day forward, wear my dark sunglasses. And from that moment, everything changed. The connections that I was able to build with my teammates, with my colleagues, with folks that were trying to do business with the city immediately changed because they understood that they also carry a source of insecurity. Because you know what? We're humans. We all have our sunglasses. It just manifests in different forms. But if we can figure out that that's just the common human experience, that that's what makes us human, that's how we can actually connect on a very deep level. Boy, the power that comes from that. So after I share my story, it often gives others permission to share their insecurity, to share what they've been through. And that's where they've had this release. That's where they get this opportunity to take that piano off their shoulders and just know that they're human, and that we're all human, and we're all dealing with these issues and challenges together. And if we just open up, and if we connect with others in an appropriate way, I'm not saying you should go into a board meeting and say, when I was 8 years old, this happened to me, but in an appropriate way, it can actually have the reverse effect of having really deep and meaningful connections with other people, which at the end of the day can bring us so much joy and great fulfillment, as you know from the exchange, right? As you know from what you're doing here on this platform.
And that is the bottom line of it. I'm just imagining while you're talking about that story, the times that we are looking at our weakest moments may be the very moments that other people see us for who we really are, and earn all kinds of respect and clarity. And my husband got so mad the other day in the dental office. At the end of the day, something was going on. It's the first time he'd ever shouted in 35 years. We had a young dental assistant that was doing some antics that she wasn't really cognizant of her effect on others, and sort of lost his temper, and he cried in front of everyone. Now he's 6'6", 270 pounds. And what he walked in on this young thing, giving a lecture to an older employee with their finger shaking and making this older employee feel bad. It broke his heart so much for this older employee that he just got really angry and started to cry. And I tell you, that day when he came home from work, he was like, I said, how'd work go? And he said, well, I cried at the end of the day. But all the other employees told me in their own turn, because of course I was like, what happened at work today? They all told me in turn how much respect they had for him for sticking up and standing up, and that they know he's working so hard, and they know he just wants to create a lovely work environment where something like that wouldn't fit at all. And what came of him breaking, or almost breaking, was a tremendous amount of respect and kindness from all these other people that work with him all day long. So, I think in our moments of weakness that we see as weak, maybe other people see us as somebody they can truly relate to.
Yes.
And because the response overwhelmingly with all of them was that they could support Dr. Chuck even better from now on, because they knew how big his heart was.
Linda, that's it in a nutshell. You just tied it up with the perfect bow. I mean, I couldn't imagine a better story to illustrate that the power of vulnerability, the power of talking about insecurity, and the power of human connection. That's the perfect story.
Yeah. Okay. So let's wrap it up here. Oh, I've got goosebumps. Let's wrap it up here, and we'll continue this conversation, a part 2. I promise everyone. I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your busy schedule. I'm going to wrap us up here by saying I hope people will visit the Goodness Exchange and look for all these exchanges like this. We need this level of story sharing and swapping of insights, because all our experiences can't possibly be the same, and we're each learning every day. I would argue that most of us are sizing things up from experiences, and if we can learn to do the kind of sharing that Jacob is advocating, we got nothing but daylight ahead of us.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you so much. It's been so nice and such a pleasure to speak with you, and thanks for the work that you're doing on behalf of all of us. We're benefiting from your work and your exchange, and Thank you. It's been a real
Um,
honor to be here.
Okay, we're going to talk soon. For now, I hope that all the connections that Jacob and I have talked about to goodness and progress throughout the coming week will just send you soaring, and that you'll see all the joy and wonder start multiplying in your life, just exactly like we've spoken about. All right, have a great day.